Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to our friends out there in the land beyond. Uh, Sometimes I don't appreciate you enough, and I thank you because it is a beautiful day. And if you wanted to skip, I would understand, or have to miss and see it in the privacy of your own home because your intentions were good, spirit was willing. Um, Speaking of vices and those pertaining to Edward Forth, we all remember, of course, that he, as they say in today's society, dated a lot. Okay, I just want to throw that in. Maybe that's not as bad as having indigestion. Can you imagine a world without Rolaids? I mean, it would be bad, but I'm assuming there were issues. And if you all know what a hangover is, not now, of course, but maybe at a certain time in life, you would be aware of that. And they don't have all those remedies. What do you do? Don't tell me. I don't want to think about what they did. But, and I don't want to think about bathing too in the context of the 15th century because they didn't. So we've said, and you have pointed it out, none of us would want to live back then. We love the present, baths, and all the rest that are so important. As far as Edward IV is concerned, however, he is very significant because if he was on a test or you wanted to pass on information to your friends, high school alumni perhaps, who are historically inquisitive, particularly in the 15th century, they would want to know that he was the first of the three Yorkist monarchs. And of course, speaking of Edward IV, I had to pick out a cigarette advertisement, probably from the 40s. I don't know why I think that, but I do. Players cigarettes. Why they would, I mean, among his vices, the use of tobacco had not entered the scene in the 15th century. So he was not knocking back what did the British say, a packet of players. So, but I don't know about now, but it was a very popular brand back in that period. And apparently they thought associating it with monarchs, as later on they would do with movie stars in the United States, would make people buy that particular brand. All of this is to say, however, that presumably in the period in which these advertisements came out, people knew who Edward IV was. Just saying, different time, decades ago. But now, thanks to this lecture, you will know all about Edward IV and you can spread it to your friends who are inquisitive. As far as Edward IV's policies are concerned, it was to be popular and eat, drink, and be merry. And he did a very good job of that, as Frank pointed out. It was not a short reign. He lived till 40 and he became king at a very early stage. And that's because, of course, his father died, Richard. Richard should have been king, but he died in battle. So the claims of the Yorkist branch then passed to Edward. So we often think about him as a very, very successful developer of government. There's been what you call Edward IV revisionism. And that means, if you can believe it, there are history conventions where people argue about the significance of Edward IV. If you want to go to one, I can make arrangements and you can hang out because then they will discuss. And you bring lots of caffeine with you to be sure to stay awake because they will argue the significance of Edward Forward. Was he really allowed, or was he really a governmental outstanding administrator, developer of royal authority, and so forth and so on? And they can do this for hours. I mean, within the historical family. I mean, not to regular people. You have normal, healthy lives. You don't need this. But with the Edward IV crowd, you could. It's amazing, really, and you get a sense of that from the book. That there are those, and I mean, after Henry VI, you can understand. I think they were ready for changes. So that's Edward IV. Now, Neville. We're going to talk a lot about Neville's today. So this is the big shot. He was buddies with Richard. I better say which Richard. That is to say, Richard, Duke of York, the father of Edward IV. We'll go over all this. The trees, lots of trees coming. Okay, so you needn't worry about that. So Neville, I would describe as an operator. He was a close friend of Richard, Duke of York. They used each other, and they were very good friends. So when Richard dies, Edward becomes king. So it's sort of like Uncle Richard is going to be right there with you. I love you like your dad, you know, all that sort of thing. You're a great young man, and I see a wonderful future. Okay, you get the general idea. And you think, well, that's just beautiful. Uncle caring for a young, for deep in mourning. No, I think pretty much they were using each other. That's the cynical view, I'm sorry to say. Because actually, the man who's known as the kingmaker was for sale. He had all kinds of connections. Big mover. And by the way, excellent in battle. Quite a warrior, quite a fighter. And of course, through marriage, inheriting the title of Warwick, and of course being a Neville himself, he had all kinds of connections. And believe you me, if they'd had him back then, he wouldn't have had to clip coupons, okay? He was quite powerful. But you say, well, wasn't that enough? No. Yeah, because you know what they say, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. I mean, it's, you know, money and land, all that's nice. But this is the ultimate business. So, what has Edward IV not done? Well, you know, go into the chapel. Remember that song? Yeah. I bet you could have been a Dixie cup. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I can't believe I remember this. This disturbed mind. But anyway, all of this is to say that he had lots of dating experience. So it wasn't like he needed to get married for that. He needed to get married for political reasons. And that's where he and Neville ended their relationship. Because, of course, Neville wanted it to be all about power and politics. And how do you do that? Go to France. Those Valois. it would seem that King Charles had a unending number of children. And of course, it went on after Valois. In this case, we're talking about Louis the 11th. And you say, Louis the 11th. To remember him, just remember they called him King Spider. And many of you may love spiders. I don't. But I mean, if you're an insect person, I respect you. I admire you. I don't. Well, anyway, why would you call a king a spider? Because he loved webs. Yes. I don't think I'd call him that to his face, but he was quite good at manipulating the English. So the idea of marrying Edward IV to a French princess and then presumably using that to create some sort of better relationship, because you know what they are, how many centuries have we gone back and seen marriages affect alliances and so forth? Whether they were sincere or not is another question. But all of this is to say that that's where the relationship took a real hit. Oh, I look at her. She's so sweet. And I bet she's in church on the front pew. Her name was Elizabeth Woodville, and they went by their maiden names. And she will become Edward IV's queen. Surprise! I'm already married. You know, there are all kinds of surprises, good surprises, bad surprises. If you are Neville, it's a bad surprise and irritating surprise. You know, I've been working, I've been strategizing, trying to set you up on dating apps, you know, trying to fix you up so you can go online and meet Miss Right, you know, and all of that. And all of this time, you married her. And guess what? She is the widow of a Lancastrian noble deceased. And he said, well, that's not Elizabeth Woodville's fault, but means you're not the kind of person we want. I mean, she already has children, 2 children by her first husband. I know. I feel the same way. If you were some biggie in the House of Lords, how would you feel? I mean, and like, he just comes out with it, says, I love her. And says, you know what that may happen. There may be problems. Okay, get ready. Nepotism. Oh, no. Please. Oh, yeah. You know who I am. Had a student sponsor say that to me. Yeah, I know. He called me and said that. You know who I am? I said, yes, and you're mighty important. That's who you are. And that's probably what a lot of Elizabeth Woodville's family did. They did. Like, I'll give an agricultural example. Hogs in a trough. They are hungry and unrefined. And they're not worried about indigestion. These Woodvilles were pouring in. You say, what do they want? What have you got? offices, patronage, and they're not like, shucks, hold back. I don't want you to consider my background. I just love England. I love people. And these people are really out, and the years will make it very obvious what is going on. Well, meanwhile, back to Neville, in a state of rage because he basically thought of himself as being Mr. Control Freak. So now the king is going out and doing his own business. I mean, Elizabeth Woodville, I mean, she's busy being fertile. 10 children by Edward IV. I know, but 2 for the first, 10 for the second. So, okay, that's a lot of trips to the maternity ward, isn't it? Yeah. So you just tell your family, I'm going to be busy being pregnant. So you all just tell my beloved husband and his officials that you're up for a job, high paying, limited hours of work. It's like you need days off. You have lots of religions. And so you have lots of holidays. I mean, it's amazing how this will be done. So that's the role of Elizabeth Woodville, although it will continue. But apparently, I mean, it worked out real well. 10 children. I don't know if Edward IV stopped dating, but I know. Hobbies or extracurricular activities, eating, drinking, yeah. 40, yeah. Which to me is like beginning of life, right? I mean, so these newcomers are the Woodvilles. There may have been some hangers on, but you just drop that name. You ever heard people called name droppers? Yeah. There are probably lots of those. And of course, if you are a biggie and you think of Woodvilles, you know what you did? Sniff that nose and you say, well, they are nothing. The Woodvilles are what we would call, and this is not mean to be ugly, B team, junior varsity. It's like you get to go to some nice parties, but you sit in the back, sort of like Rotarians of the House of Lords. You're not really part of us, but you do have a lot of money. And you're a plutocrat, and it's nice to be a plutocrat. You're rich, but you don't have my breeding, my blue blood. Yours is just red. So the idea of the Woodvilles is that they are not of the nobles, and they're getting a lot of the positions and authority that would have gone to the upper class. So that's interesting. That's why I call them underlings. I mean, it's not like they were in the FFA or they had worked for John Deere. Nothing like that. These people were rich, well established, but they just weren't top nobles. So it's interesting to know, however, that he had a younger brother who was doing very well at the time, and thanks to films and television shows, we know him well. And who is this kid brother? Richard, Duke of Gloucester. We're going to hear a lot about him. And Richard, Duke of Gloucester, it gives fraternalism a good name. You know, the bonding of the two brothers, because they were very close. He was Lord Protector of the North, and we need protection up there because, you know, those Scots will get out of control. We don't watch them. And sometimes people in Northumberland can act up too. So all of this is to say that Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was the brother who was very, very involved during this period, because we're talking now about, as we move on 1470s all the way up to the early 80s. Now, we wonder what happened to Duke of Warwick, Richard Neville. You ever heard that expression, when you're a child, take your toys and go home? That's what he did. He went to France. I mean, I love France. Who wouldn't want to go to France? I know you would. But you understand, of course, you're going as a protest. You hurt my feelings by marrying Elizabeth Woodville. And now I'm pouting. He did. He went to France. And what does he do in France? Well, I guess he had hobbies, activities. Maybe he did some rotations in the French military. I don't know. Yeah, but I can tell you this. There was no coming back. There was no like, gosh, I said some harsh things. And I know Liz is a wonderful woman, and I know you are keeping her pregnant, obviously, and 10 children, I remind you. And just think, there could have been miscarriages for all I know. All of this then is to say that isn't coming back. And the longer it lasted, you know what happens. Not going to practice without a license, but I think the anger grew, you know, because they don't reach out to each other. So you said some tough things, I did too. But, you know, deep inside, this bond, no. Don't get mad, get even. Yeah.
Do we know why he married her? Was he in love? I mean,
I'm so glad you asked that, Lee. I was kind of like reaching out. I said, somebody will do it. Not the foggiest. You know, we'd had the modern, and the people go online and get these lurid things going. I can't imagine how he even met. Hey, baby, you come here often? You know, in my day, they would say, what's your sign? You probably don't remember that.
let's go to Vegas and get married.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you expect something lurid. Hey, baby, you're really fine. I mean, I'm making all this up. I can't imagine how this happened, because it's not that he was without other companions.
But it had to be, right? Because if she had kids prior, then
Oh,
that
no.
was more the taboo.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, they're legitimate.
Yeah, well, no,
Not-
yeah, but I'm talking about like
She was a widow.
taking that on as a man, like he had other options.
Oh, yeah,
So,
lots of options. I mean,
yeah.
that's
so
one. Yeah. I mean,
Love had to be in there somewhere.
it's a very odd business because we
There's no
don't
movie
know.
about their true love or anything like that. How it over-
Oh, Harlequin rules. Go Big H. I mean, maybe so. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I just can't do it. But Hallmark. Yeah, there must be a novel about this somewhere.
You could bring that up tomorrow with the author. Maybe she'd like to write a book about it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, but if I knew anything that I believed, I would tell you. But I don't, so I'm not going to.
Okay.
It's just, but boy, could you imagine the faces of all those big shots when he walks in and says, hon, I want you to meet all the Privy Council. And they're going, sacre bleu, you know, I think they're PO'd, if you want to know the truth. So anyway, but boy, she had lots of power. So now we have Edward the Fourth with a major enemy. And at the same time, guess who else we have? We have Henry the Sixth, wife and son. Oh, yeah, they're in France. Remember, Margaret is Margaret of Anjou. And if we are a Valois, she was part of the family, kin to Louis XI. So she could hang out. I don't think living the high life. You mean you got a small child, but I don't think. Louis XI, remember King Spider, thinks it'd be fun to get together Margaret of Anjou with Neville, Warwick. You've had, I'm sure, we all have, people who don't like each other, and then you bring them together. Hi, so-and-so. I want you to shake hands with so-and-so, and they go, oh, hi. That is like a warm hug in comparison with Margaret and Warwick. You can say, I don't like you. And why don't you like? Well, I mean, you're responsible for my husband being put away in the Tower of London guest suite right now. And my son and I are having to be in France on welfare. I mean, it's not a good situation. But we have something in common. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about Edward Forward? 1 minus 1. I mean, isn't it interesting and to say like, oh, you don't? Oh gosh, I feel the same way. Would you like to maybe have a drink and talk?
What's the saying? That enemy of my enemy is a friend.
You are mighty right, sister. I think I like you. Nay, I think I love you. I mean, this is wonderful. I think we can get close. You know, and it's very ironic because he had actually questioned her son's legitimacy. Was he a little, take you back again to our day, love child? Now, is that true? Well, maybe. I mean, Henry VI doesn't strike me as the sort of being interested in being a father. Remember Henry VI, kind of churchy and not always with it. But everybody just wanted a child. And so the child came, but there were rumors. So ironically, maybe over some cognac or whatever it is they drink over there, they decided to put their differences aside. God, Pact of Steel, Hitler and Stalin, I think about two people who really loathe each other, and you can think of some, and think about the fact that this is a very strange relationship, but they have a common purpose, doing something about Edward Fold. That's the truth. So they say, you know, they're at the banquet, say, You know, I've decided you aren't as bad as I thought you were. You know, I really hated you. Abhorred you, detested you. And now I think we can be, well, not friends, let's just say allies. How can we do this? Should we have a toast? No, let's have our children get married. Yeah. It's what it's all about. The big M, marriage. You know, I've got a child about your child's age. So that's exactly what happens. Henry VI's child, who's with Margaret, is going to be married to the daughter of Warwick. It's a quickie. I don't think they have a long engagement, okay? And I think they can pull out a priest or maybe even a bishop. You know, no Vegas. Or they don't go to Marseille or something. I mean, they do it up. But it's fast. Because you understand there's a lot more at stake than amour. So, Margaret's son and Henry's allegedly will now marry Anne. And she's going to be important to us in several respects. So, meanwhile, we're presumably Anne and Edward are getting ready for their teenage honeymoon. This is all, gosh. Annette Funicello, maybe, and Frankie Avalon. I don't know. I wouldn't think it would be a beach movie, personally. But I would think they're married and maybe having a little love nest somewhere. While Margaret and her new friend are busy bringing their military forces together. Because you know where they're going. England. Yeah. We are going to do some military practices and get ready to cross the channel. Because Edward IV is going down. Because we've got a VIP in the Tower of London. Margaret of Anjou, fascinating character. And many of you probably seen the various HBO dramas in which she's the lead character. In many ways, she'll get out there with them. And I think she was fighting, but I think she was actually involved on-site observations and activities involving that force. I think the future of her son and his authority to be was very important. In fact, paramount to her. So, they do go to England. Edward IV beats, I call it a strategic retreat. I guess he doesn't feel secure enough to have it out now. And he goes to Burgundy. And you say, what's in Burgundy? Well, Burgundy wine. But you'll also be aware that the Burgundians were sometime allies of the English. And guess where Edward IV's sister was? Burgundy. That's why all these people, I know, but you never know where your sisters may be. They're married hither and thither. So Burgundy was maybe you're sorry your sister's just the Duchess, but that's not bad to be a Duchess. Better than being a peasant. Yeah, but I'd rather be a queen. Well, sorry. Margaret of Burgundy, though, was very important, and so she welcomed her brother, and I guess they hung out there until he's ready to go back. Meanwhile, Margaret, to use the terms of the modern day, sprung out her husband, got him out of his suite at the Tower of London. Could you imagine what that was like? Because remember, they didn't have any medication back then. So when they come and get him out of his cell, I guess, I don't know what kind of accommodations they provided for royal guests, but I wouldn't think it was that nice. And when they get him out and said, honey, we're going back home now. And you go, say what? Who are you? You know, it's really bad. They do though. It won't be long, but technically, if you were maybe on a quiz show, you could call me and I would help. Because technically, they sort of say he was temporarily king. Okay. You look on some of these charts, they sell them at thousands of places online and in various tourist shops, along with mugs and t-shirts and all the rest. And you would say, well, when is he king? Well, part of 1470 and part of 1471. But he's not really there. You understand that it's Margaret. And of course, our new friend. Oh, hi. You know, because our children are married now. But don't forget that. I think, you know, I don't know how important that is in terms of politics, but it is significant. They've got something going because we are looking at the king to be. You know, looking over at the breakfast table and saying it's not just Junior anymore. Your future king, because this is Mommy Dearest. I mean, she wants some power too. And that's very important. I mean, I don't blame her. I'm just saying that this represents a lot. And don't you think she's thinking about little Anne? You know, anytime you want to be fruitful, that'll be fine. Because, you know, they're thinking about the future. You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon to me. So, they hadn't counted on Edward coming back, but he did. And he came back with renewed strength and resources. I presume simply being there, or perhaps the nobility missed him in a way. I don't think they wanted a return of Henry VI because that government had not been especially successful or popular. So he came back, and it was just a few months. That's why I say only the person who's a pedant will scold you if you say, was Henry VI really king during 1470, 71? I don't know. I would think of it as a quickie reign because he's not there, first of all. And second of all, it's such a short period that I'm really not thinking he'll be ready for the lockup again pretty soon. Oh, do I have to go back? You know, it's sort of like recess, you know, when it's over and you think, can't we have another time off? You know, that kind of thing. You know how they always want to break more time off. So he came back and now they have it out. First of all, with forces of his one-time friend, and that's the Battle of Barnet. And Barnet is going to be over here. Notice April of 1471. Then look at the opposite side, the biggie, Tewkesbury. You see Tewksbury, capital T. It's afterwards. And that's the end of the Wars of the Roses. Now, all this didn't just happen. We have two different sets of forces, nobles and their hired hands. These are not citizen armies or anything of the sort. These are professionals fighting. These particular armies, though, had a very important role in deciding who is going to be the true king. With Yorkists versus Lancastrians. And you can imagine that at Barnet, the Duke was definitely going to be ended. Nobody said, yeah, but maybe we can be friends again, or no. You need to die. It's over. We hate you now. So that was that. And again, if you ever saw any of these series, Margaret led her forces at the Battle of Tewksbury, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about it. And Tewksbury was truly the end. Not only did she lose the battle, but it appears that somehow her son died in the battle. And so the whole purpose of Cores was to maintain him. So Tewksbury has great significance in the history of the Wars of the Roses when you think about it, because I hate to use such a cheesy word as broken. You notice I do there, the broken Margaret, but I think that's fair. I mean, yeah, the husband has to go back to the Tower of London, but that's okay. He's used to it. And I don't think it's like, oh, baby, I'll be writing you long letters every day. I don't think it's one of the jailhouse love affairs. I think, it's been real. But the fact is that her purpose of life, the young Prince of Wales as he was, is now gone. She doesn't get back to France right away, because you know what they want? Yeah, cash money. You want Margaret back home? What's it worth to you? Isn't that rude? Yeah. But that's exactly the way they do. It takes money, fundraisers. Yeah, I know. Advancement people coming after you. Yeah, and they've had advancement out there. If you all are looking for careers, if you're thinking about advancement, yeah, you can really be annoying, can't you? But can you imagine? And Margaret is not treated nicely, because they're not going, Your Majesty, this, can we make you comfy, or would you need, you're a loser, ex-queen. That hurts. But her life is essentially over, I guess. When she finally does get back, she's going to live till the ripe old age of 52. Bless her heart. I mean, talk about elderly. God, 52. Yeah, doesn't seem bad to me, but yeah. But the idea is very odd. It was not a happy life. I don't know if Louis XI brought out a bandwagon. Welcome back, Margaret. We're so glad to have you. We love you so much. she got back and I think she took a low profile. And she was on a budget. Remember, they didn't have Social Security. So I don't know what exactly, but it was not comfortable because they didn't get to take any like her Lancastrian, widows. It wasn't like any kind of last will and testament with Henry saying, because I must say, Henry VI, and I use the word eliminated because that sounds like something out of we say oft. Sometimes in our crosswords they do that, like it's a mafia murder. But I won't be crude and just say that his stay in the Tower was brief. It appears, and this is what they told me at the Tower of London. So I'm never sure about I always suspect they make up stories for tips, but that's just my opinion. Never question them. Beef eaters. Just say, oh, that's interesting. And don't tell him. And then I don't ever say, that would be rude. I just listen to the story. But he said that Henry was actually doing the Our Father and Hail Mary when they took him out and killed him. But I know, but that's just probably a bit melodramatic. But anyway, just like The Sopranos, not to besmirch Italo Americans, who are wonderful people. I'm just saying that there are sometimes individuals that basically don't need to be anymore. And you just the food bill, transportation, it's expensive to incarcerate somebody. So now we won't have those incarceration charges. So that's the end of Henry VI, and Margaret's gone, 52 years young. So that is the end of the Wars of the Roses, but hardly the interest of the story. Okay, speaking of cheesy, look at this picture. You say, could this have been done by Leonardo, Michelangelo? Even I know better than that. This is 18th century romantic in the worst sense of the word. And you say, how real to life is it? Totally not. Now, who is the woman? I assume this is Anne, his wife. And there's the young Prince Edward. And you see the meanies all around him? Yeah. And they're not nice. And they don't care about him, and they don't say, we want you to have a happy and good life. No, they're wicked, evil, nay, demonic. Did this happen? No. But it's an interesting portrayal.
And they didn't have any children?
Didn't have time.
Didn't have.
No. I mean, it takes time. I learned that in biology. I took zoology, and so I know about that. Her name was Anne Neville. And guess what? Anne was back she barely had time to mourn for little Eddie. And then they said, you don't want to be single. She said, no, do I have other options? You're mighty right. But now you have a Lancaster and you can have a Lancaster. That's the truth. Now she married Richard of Gloucester. And you say, I remember him. Wasn't he Edward IV's younger brother? You're right. And that's Anne Neville. So she goes then from Henry VI's son to Edward IV's younger brother. See, you have trees for all this. See, that's very important, but that's the way it worked. Oh, and she'll have a baby by him. Okay, that's another sad story, but anyway, Richard of Gloucester, and everybody knows about, ooh, Richard III, woo. So, I couldn't resist this. You see over here, I think about some of you all like these battle participation things. They actually, I read about this summer at Tewksbury. They have this big, and I said, I cannot believe there are enough people who know about the Wars of the Roses nowadays. I guess any battle, they don't care about that. Maybe in this country they do Antietam, and they don't really know that much about it, but it's just fun activity. Because I'm not sure they say, I'm a Lancastrian, I'm a Yorkist. Yeah. I'm not sure. I just think it's a fun day. And they attack each other, and they could have some BBC British mystery, about that. Somebody gets accidentally murdered in that. But all of this was interesting. Now, notice 2021. Any of you who are philatelists, this came up in 2021, and I thought, boy, if you were at the British Post Office and you were a philatelist, you would be going for this. You would say, really? Yeah. You would want this in your stamp collection, don't you think? I mean, you would be going like, oh my gosh, this will be perfect for my collection. Franklin D. Roosevelt collected stamps. So there's Tewksbury. So you would want the whole ensemble. I mean, because you would have a whole set, not trying to get you turned on. You might be able, gosh, that was 2021, 4 years ago. So you might have to go to eBay now, because I guess they moved on. But I'm just fascinated that people still care about Tewksbury. And I mean, I care about Tewksbury. I mean, not that I think about it all the time, but enough, more than is good for you. Because I think about Margaret Longshue, little boy, and so forth and so on. But they have the stamp collection, and then you ask yourself again, does the public, we were talking about misbehaving children in school. Would they like to learn about wars? Maybe not the Wars of the Roses so much, since it's British, but perhaps they would be more interested in wars involving the United States. I don't know. But Tewksbury, I guess, was the most obvious, and I just found this fascinating. Because I imagine they would all then go and have a cup of tea, or scone, or what, all those lovely things the British do to have fun. Or maybe go to a pub and have adult beverages. I don't know. I'm just saying this goes on. And it's all about Tewksbury. Now we get to him. Yeah. Now, to say that he gets a bad press is already obvious. We've seen the movies. We've seen the television shows. If you've seen a Richard III revisionist, because next term I'll be talking about that dreadful Thomas Cromwell and revisionism there. But in this case, I'm not aware of anyone who says, Richard III had a good heart. A lot of people loved him. Well, I think by the time he became king, everybody pretty well hated him. It certainly would appear that way when you read Shakespeare's plays and all the other evidence we have. Is that fair? Well, I don't know if history is always based on what's fair. It's just the kind of reputation he had. Younger brother and favorite, I guess you would say, of Edward IV. Remember, he was sort of protecting the king's interests in the north. And who, sure, the king didn't expect to die at the age of 40, even though you're hardly living a long time, but yes, he was thinking maybe another 5 or even 10 years. Yikes, I can even go for 50. Not the way you're living. So he's out of there. Guess what? You're not going to be king because of that Woodville woman. You remember fruitful one? 10, count them 10. 12 if you want to count first husbands. This is little Edward. Oh, he was cute. Aren't they always? And basically, I'm sure he went around, his father said, you can dress up like daddy. You know, all that people like to do. And this will be, and again, for your royal charts, this one counts. This will be Edward V. And if you really want to stun friends at parties, I know. Ask them what they know about Edward V. They will be stunned that you can tell them. It'll make your whole term's tuition worthwhile. Because that's Edward V. How long was he king? Briefly. We're talking briefly. So briefly, it's difficult to say when he was actually king. But I think your friends would have already moved on back to the bar before they could ask that. So don't worry about it. You will not be bothered or harassed with further questions. Let's just say that he had the right to be king as the eldest son of Edward IV. And let me tell you, what do they call those people? Stage door mothers. Because you can believe that Edward V had one in Elizabeth Woodville. And think of all those Woodvilles in the trough. You think they didn't want to keep eating? Shoot, yeah. I mean, it's not like they were going, gosh, well, we don't want to impose. Oh, no. You talk about tenure. They definitely have tenure. They think they do. God, even royal politics can be a little tricky sometimes. But many of these people were well established. We love little Eddie. We miss his dad. But we love you so much, you know, the usual. I know I sound terribly cynical, but you understand sometimes there's some insincerity. Yeah. So now what happens? We get a tree. Yes. I know you've been waiting. I could feel it. But this is a quickie tree. It's a nice tree to make you feel good. Because it's sort of limited. Most of the goodies are cut out, you know. Sort of like a limb here and a limb there.
It's a trim tree.
Yeah, trim. Lots of trim. There's the Woodvilles. And look at all those children just lined up. I bet who did that tree and never had to go through pregnancy. Yeah, don't you? I mean, they should have gotten a little more credit than that. But look, all those. Richard and see Cecily Neville. You say, why did those Nevilles come back? I don't know, but yeah, lots of Nevilles. And then go up here. See who her father was, Ralph Neville. Look at the mother. Another Beaufort. Those Beauforts come back. You want to have love children. You remember that. Think about it. Because those were all from the Beaufort line. And then there's a Mortimer over there. As I say, it's just like a small town, isn't it? You hear these names over and over again, and with good reason. Because once they get them in, it's pretty hard to get them out. Because they breathe. And then the next line of them come along. So, all of these are Elizabeth Woodville's children. Then notice also all these children by Edward IV, his sisters and brothers. And we'll talk about them momentarily, but you notice Edward and Richard. And then, of course, they have all the others. See that Margaret down there? That would be the Duchess of Burgundy. She gets a little older. And I mean a little older, 11 or 12. And off she gets shipped to Burgundy. That's the way these things work. But, and those who survived, by and large, of course, had other positions. Not our problem. Now, we've already mentioned Richard, the future Richard III, was very important in the Yorkist campaign, the Yorkist regime. And he loved his brother. Well, he served his brother very well. I mean, I don't know how you would feel to have to call your brother your majesty all the time. You know, it wouldn't be like the old days when you could just hang out. Because he's now king and I'm one of his royal servants. I guess Harry thought that was. So all of this then is to say that when Edward IV dies, Richard is far from being cross, but he's very irritated because he didn't ever approve of the king marrying Elizabeth Woodville. I mean, we all try to like our in-laws, you know, and welcome them to the family. Sometimes, maybe he agreed with Warwick and others who said, those Woodvilles. You know, you don't say it in front of the king, but that would be rude and hurtful, maybe. Maybe hazardous to your health, like you send zero. But by and large, we understand that he did not approve of that marriage. Well, who asked you, Dickie boy? Well, I'm not sure anybody did, but that's the way he felt. And what it means, of course, is that there are going to be bad feelings from day one, particularly when Edward IV died. Meanwhile, back with Anne, and several great actresses have played that part in various films and so forth. But in this case, I mean, it's a tragic role because it's not easy, I guess, waking up next to Richard 30. So, yeah, at least, but I mean, it's not like, oh, I always dreamed of being your wife. It's not none of that. But they are married and they have a son. So, as I point out, she had a little experience based on her time as the wife of the Prince of Wales, Edward Prince of Wales. To go from the Lancastrians to the Yorkists, you could say, oh, a change of pace. Well, I don't know about that, but you know, you're very important. And you know, you've got 5 letters, 2 syllables, could be in your crossword puzzle. Dowry, never forget that. That comes with having pregnancies. You got to have that dowry. You can't say, isn't love and devotion enough? No. We got to have some property. So I think she's an interesting character, tragic, but you know, you'd always like to know how much right or authority did she have in this whole business? And I'd say very little. So she's married to him. And then there's Edward V. He didn't have time to get married. I think he lived 11 or 12 years. So it's not long. And during that period of course, he's basically a Woodville. And that sounds odd, doesn't it? You think, what about the influence of his father? Well, between Edward's extracurricular activities, his administrative responsibilities, it's not easy to play dad and, you know, throw the ball, you know, and say, let's go out and have a game, or maybe we can be on a bowling team together. I don't know what is it royal people do. I mean, I don't even know if Philip and Henry were close. The idea being that the Woodvilles had plenty of time for little Eddie, Edward V to be. And why did they have time? The cynic in me says to get him ready. We love you, ready. Because little kinglets become big kings. And when they become kings, what do they want to do? They want us to be around them because we're their cousins. And we love them very much. And we kiss their cheeks whenever we can. That's the way it seems to me. Gloucester notes all of these. And I'm not trying to be a Richard revisionist, but I'm just saying that he disliked and maybe feared the Woodvilles once his brother was dead, because they had control of little Edward. And what would they have done to him if he had given them a chance? Well, I think he would have been, I don't know, golden parachute or, but it's not like, well, you were the brother and we love you too. You know, that fraternalism that we hear so much about. I'm not so sure about that. I'm sure the Woodvilles could be just as rough as any other powerful family. In any event, Richard, basically fearing the takeover of the Woodvilles through Edward V, decided to strike. And he did so in an action which has been so well known through the centuries. Let's set the stage. We know and love the Tower of London. You may prefer the Hilton, the Marriott, not the Golden Cherry, though, but something, there's a limit, okay? But the idea of going to the Tower of London is nice for a tour, but I wouldn't want to live there. However, I guess in the 15th century, there was a wing for people who were under special care, prisoners. And then there was a wing where the royalty could get together, maybe have a hospitality suite. Other people came by, and those darn Scots, they were always coming in and out, various French rulers, international rulers. So all of this is to say that they were getting ready. We think about Charles and Camilla. And they didn't have television back then. But they have the inauguration, getting ready for the crowning coronation, little Edward V. So his Uncle Richard said, I know you won't mind if I just borrow him for a day or two so we can get him ready and go over his lines in the coronation oath. And my darling sister-in-law, Elizabeth. I'll take good care of him. He's a special guy. Yes, you saying, God, it's like I'm ODing on dominoes. I mean, it's so sweet. Yeah. But somehow she lured him away, or he lured the little boy away. And we all understand what's going to happen. How true it is, we'll never know. And believe me, people have tried to find out. However, there are lots and lots of movies and books and Showtime, HBO, you name it. And there's even a Richard III Society. If you don't have anything to do on a long weekend, you could join the Richard III Society. These are, have you ever been there? It's very disturbing. I mean, these people need to get out more, meet people. I mean, yeah. Because they're going like, get up every morning and say, I wonder what new ideas they have in my society, hang out with the frat brothers and sisters and say, what new theories are there out there? I mean, that's sad, but that's the way it is. Anyway, but it's Richard III versus the Woodvilles. But whatever the case, we never hear from them. Why the pictures are always so romantic, and this is terribly romantic. A 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. I know. Some of you who are parents, you can ask yourself, does that really look? And they are done up. Yeah, they're not dressed for field work. They are fixed. So you have little King Edward V, and then little brother Richard, the Duke of York. Now again, no telling how much the artist got for that painting, but again, this I think you would agree is highly romanticized. What really happened, I don't suppose anyone will ever know. But I thought this one was particularly
Lurid.
Yeah, lurid is a very good word for it. And of course, now they've gotten younger. Look at them, they just little old fellas, you know? They've taken off years. But as far as age, the other two, again, you say, how much fact is this based on? None. All they know is that, gosh, as late as the 20th century, they were still digging up bones and such in and around the Tower of London and thinking, oh gosh, blimey. They think, they think they will find the right DNA or something. But anyway, they never came out, that's for sure. Now, I'm not a card-carrying member of this Richard III Society, so you can't bring me down on any charges like that. But I will say that he, from the time they were going to be involved in the coronation of Edward V, he'd already basically started cooling off and saying their little B word. Yeah. Because Richard III, as he would become, did not recognize his brother's marriage to that woman. Yeah. That is the truth, and that may have something to do with it. Because if Edward V is not legitimate, and he had, sound like something out of some novel, an accident, and little brother happens to be with him, maybe has a little too much to drink. Oh, yeah, Agatha Christie could come up, I'm sure, with something. But all of that is to say that basically he just said, wham, bam, they are gone. And there's no CNN or there's no anybody reporting live from the Tower of London. There's nobody out there checking. You say now, how did the Woodfields feel about this? Not pleased. I mean, think of their mother. Think of the other thing. Where, you've seen all that. I'm thinking he said, if they weren't doing well, our kids are. Sometimes they had health issues, And now he assumes I'm king. And those little love children seem to have gone bye-bye. And we'll never know. But you'll notice my last line, that's never stopped anybody from writing, gosh, how many novels? The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tey. That was one of the famous ones I remember, because there's so many plots that can be made around that. And of course, the more gruesome, the better. But the fact is, they're no longer in the picture. They've been declared illegitimate by the government. Meaning, can I call him Uncle Dickie's government? Because on his kingly chart, there's been no real king since his brother. Because he does not recognize his so-called nephew. Because his nephew is a B word. Yeah, that word. So, yeah, I prefer Love Child. It sounds so romantic and nice, doesn't it? But what happens to Richard now? Let's just say he's got what's coming to him. 1483 to 1485. You could learn that, but that will be very important because you'll impress everybody when you get asked at a social event. When does the tutor period begin? And you'll be alone in getting it right. All of this money going to Ollie will be worth it. And I'll see you all next time and we'll finally get to Henry Sutton. Thanks y'all.